I don't know where it came from, but I can tell you what happened when everything went to shit. By everything, I mean the whole world. At least it appeared to be happening everywhere before the stations went off the air for the last time. I was one of the unfortunate ones that got stuck in the middle of the city when it all started. By some miracle, I have not been infected, but soon we will run out of food and have to make it out, or at least try. I was at work when the screaming started, blood-curdling screaming, the kind that sends the hairs on the back of your neck to full attention. Everyone ran to the windows to see what was happening. All I could see was blood everywhere and people running in every direction. What the hell happened out there? Someone asked. It had appeared that a fight had broken out in the middle of the street. Cars were stopped and honking, and a man kneeling over someone who wasn't moving, blood forming a thick, black puddle at his knees. We thought he was performing CPR until he raised his head and looked right at us in the window. Chunks of flesh dangled from his lips, blood smeared over his whole face and his eyes. Oh my God, his eyes, they were blank, no life in them. That's when panic broke out. I don't remember much of what happened next, but I know that person in the road was no longer there when I got out of the building. I ran. Driving would have been pointless. By this time, cars were abandoned in the street and people were hurting themselves in every direction. There was so much blood, it was running in rivers down the street. I started seeing more people shambling aimlessly, attacking anyone in their way. When I got away from the crowd, I stopped to catch my breath. The heavy smell of copper hung thick in the air, and I watched in shock as one of them limped toward me. He was covered in blood, and the flesh on his cheek was ripped clean off and hung loosely, banging against his jaw. He got closer and I couldn't move. I just stared at his blank, cloudy eyes and the swinging chunk of flesh, mesmerized. That's when someone grabbed my arm from behind me and pulled me back into a building. "Are you stupid, girl?" he screamed in my face once the building was secured behind us. I couldn't speak, but looking around the room, there were 3 more people, all looking as scared as I felt. "I get it, we're all scared, but you almost got yourself killed." "Name's Randy." He stuck out his hand and I slowly reached out to shake it. Grace," I stuttered. He was a big man, his face chiseled and hard-looking, his graying hair buzzed neatly close to his scalp, military style. My eyes drifted to the .45 strapped to his side and he patted it lightly and smiled. "Never leave home without her," he chuckled. "This here is Max and Abigail." He pointed to a couple holding hands. They were in their late 20s. She was small, with long dark hair and big green eyes that were darting in every direction. Max was tall and thin, towering over her by a good 4 inches. His brown hair hung in his face, covering baby blue eyes. "And that is Isaac over there." He pointed to a man in his early 20s sitting on a crate by himself with his head in his hands. He didn't look up. I shook hands with the young couple. Isaac didn't acknowledge anyone. "Don't mind him," was all Randy said. "What's happening out there?" I asked finally. Randy stared off for a minute, then answered quietly. "The news is saying some new drug hit the streets, and it's making people go crazy." "That don't look like drugs to me. I saw a guy get killed in the street then get up and attack another person. That ain't drugs." "I think I saw that happen too. I mean, I saw a guy eating someone and the next thing I knew that person was gone, and I don't think he was eaten," I mumbled. Not even I was believing the words coming out of my mouth. Randy just nodded and ran his hand over his jawline thoughtfully, the stubble making a quiet scraping sound. Silence hung thick in the room, while outside was chaos and panic. Just then, the silence was broken by a woman, soaked in blood, slammed into the window. The impact sending spiderweb cracks in every direction. "Come on. We gotta get out of here." Randy led the way deeper into the dark building, toward the back. We followed Randy through the building to an emergency exit, where he stopped. "I know of a safe place," he told us flatly, as he pulled his gun from its holster and checked the magazine. "Stay close to me." He pushed open the exit door slowly and peeked out into an alleyway, then waved his hand for us to follow. We made our way across the city streets, careful to stay away from main roads. "There's an armory a few blocks down," Randy said, catching his breath. "We can make it if we stick to side streets and alleys. We will be safe there. They should be setting up a safe zone for survivors." "They? Who are they?" Abigail asked. Randy looked annoyed. The military, now come on, he snapped. We made it to the armory, but barely. One of them grabbed Abigail by the hair, attempting to drag her into an alley, his jaws snapping next to her ear as she screamed. Randy didn't hesitate. He barely aimed and shot it right between the eyes. "Who are you?" I asked, stunned. He shook his head and stood silently as Max picked Abby off the ground. Randy approached her, putting both hands on each side of her face. He turned her head to the side. "What the hell are you doing, man?" Max screamed. "Shut up a second," Randy yelled back. He was looking in Abby's ear. Finally, he dropped his hands and muttered, "You'll be fine." What the hell was that? Max continued to yell at Randy's back as he continued onto the armory. "Just checking to make sure she wasn't infected," Randy said calmly. "If you know something about what's going on here, you need to tell us, man," Max insisted. Randy stopped suddenly, staring directly ahead of us. "I will tell you what I know when we get there. For now, shut up and follow me or you're gonna get us all killed," he snapped at Max, never breaking his gaze from the road ahead. We continued on in silence. Max had his arm around Abby, who was still shaking, and Isaac walked next to them, head still down. We made it to the armory as dusk was settling in. The sirens and shots from the main roads in the city had begun to grow silent, but the screams still rang out from all directions. The armory stood silently in front of us, dark and abandoned. "So much for your safe zone," Max muttered bitterly. Randy didn't seem to hear him. He stood frozen in front of the door. His calm demeanor was starting to falter. "Shit," he yelled and kicked the door. "God damn it." The door swung open and the coppery smell of blood hit us all. Randy went in first and waved at us to stay back as he disappeared into the dark. After a few minutes, he reappeared, looking defeated. "It's clear. Shut the door." Max and Randy barricaded the doors and windows with wood they got from broken furniture around the building, while the three of us sat in a small office, silently. The shadows were getting long now and we could barely see. "Is he okay?" I whispered to Abby and nodded toward Isaac, sitting by himself in a corner. "Don't bother, he hasn't said a word since we met him. I'm not even sure how Randy got his name out of him." "Maybe that's not even his name," she whispered back. "The guys came back in the room then. That will have to do for now." Randy sounded tired now. They had found 2 flashlights and enough water bottles for all of us. "Still had some provisions left," he muttered, handing out the water. "Now tell us what the hell is going on. You know something about this." Max was still angry. Randy pulled a chair out of a corner and sat down. He looked tired and older than he had looked earlier. "I work for the military, retired actually. I was reactivated this morning to try and contain this thing. I guess I'm deactivated again now," he sighed. "Thing?" I asked. "I don't know where it came from, if we created it or it's some crazy supernatural anomaly. Hell, from what I've seen today, I believe either. It's a parasite, a black nasty leech-looking thing that feeds on brain matter. Those things out there, they aren't people, not anymore. They are parasites, they're dead." The room was silent. We stared at him in disbelief. "That's what you were looking for in my ear," Abby whispered. Randy nodded and hung his head. It spread so fast, there was nothing we could do. A heavy silence hung in the room. Max wrapped his arm around Abby and she dropped her head onto his shoulder. Isaac finally looked up from the floor. He stared at Randy, rage burning in his eyes as he slowly stood up. He never broke his stare as he stood for a few moments, hands balled into fists at his sides. Suddenly he was on top of Randy, pounding at his face and chest, screaming, "You killed her," over and over. A stunned Randy grabbed his arms, twisting them behind his back to subdue him. "You got your shots in, kid, but I didn't kill nobody." Isaac burst into tears and Randy dropped his arms. Keeping his eyes on him, he said, "Isaac's girl got infected. I had to put her down." "I'm sorry, kid, but she was going to kill you." "Put her down?" Abby sounded disgusted. "She was a person." "Not anymore, she wasn't." Randy was still staring at Isaac. "You should have let her kill me." Isaac sobbed. Randy walked away from him. "Jesus Christ," he shouted and walked out of the room. Now here we are, silently sitting in a dark little office, waiting. waiting for the silence to come outside, the silence that means everyone is gone and the infected have taken over the streets. Then we can make our move to leave the city and find safety if there is any left. Then we make our move to survive. We sat in a stunned silence, save for Isaac's muffled sobs. Nobody dared to move, much less speak. The room was completely dark now, and outside was only the sound of groaning and scuffling footsteps. Minutes seemed like hours in that tiny room. I began to wonder about other survivors. Maybe if we could find others, we could make a safe place. I was so lost in my thoughts that I hadn't noticed that Randy had returned, his large frame filling the doorway in a dark silhouette. He was silent, stoic. "We will be safe here tonight, but we need to gather supplies and leave by morning," he finally said softly. "Leave where?" Max asked. "For starters, out of the city and away from anywhere with a large population. After that, I really don't know," Randy sounded defeated. "I found some cots in the back. We can spread out a bit and try to get some sleep. I was also thinking we should have one person keeping watch at all times," he added. Max, Abby, and I got up to follow Randy. "Isaac?" I said softly. He didn't acknowledge me. "Leave him," Randy said coldly. I nodded reluctantly and followed the rest of the group to the back of the building. Randy was explaining how he found a stash of weapons and some food rations, at least enough to get us by for now. He had set up cots for each of us with blankets on top and announced that he would keep watch until he was sure the rest of us knew how to handle weapons. Nobody argued with him, but nobody was expecting to sleep either. We did sleep, though. The morning sun shone into the room from skylights and a heavy silence echoed from outside. Abby and Max were just waking up as my gaze shifted to the empty cot on the other side of me. "Isaac never came out here last night," I said in almost a whisper. "We should check on him," Abby suggested. Abby and I made our way back to the little office we all huddled into the night before and found it empty. We exchanged confused looks and began calling his name. "He's gone." Randy's voice boomed from the opposite side of the building from us. "What do you mean, gone?" Abby was beginning to get defensive now. "Just what I said, he's gone. Took off in the middle of the night." He was staring down at her coldly. "And you let him? He's going to die out there. How could you just let him just leave?" She screamed. "Look, I tried, I really did. He was hearing none of it from me. I can't hold him hostage." Abby stormed out of the room with an exasperated sigh. "She's right, you know," I said. "He's going to die out there alone," I added, following Abby back to the cots where Max was waiting. "What's going on?" Max asked, alarmed. "Randy just let Isaac walk out the door." Abby was glaring at Randy standing in the doorway, looking exhausted. Randy shook his head, crossed the room and began packing up a large backpack. "We're going to need supplies, weapons, food, water," he said without looking up. "I don't see why we can't just stay here. They haven't even tried to get in here. It seems safe enough," Abby whined. "Because they will get in here and I don't want to be in here when they do," Randy snapped back. "He's right," Max said. "We should pack up as much as we can carry and get out of here while we can," he finished. An hour later, we were quietly making our way out of the armory and heading out of the city. Randy had given each of us military-grade combat knives he had found stashed in a storage room and gave instructions to aim for the head, always. Randy kept the guns and promised to do target practice with each of us before handing them out. In his words, "I ain't getting shot by some dumbass that can't handle a gun." Maneuvering through the city proved to be more of a challenge than we had anticipated. We spent hours holed up in an abandoned house, waiting out a large group of the infected as they slowly shambled through the streets. "There's got to be another way out of here," Max whispered. "I'm working on it," Randy answered. Max threw his hands up. "Okay," was all he said. Tempers were getting hot as we sat in the living room of this little house, the air so still and hot, it felt like a sauna. "Hey!" Abby was pointing out the picture window. "Get your ass down. They can see you," Randy snapped. She furrowed her eyebrows and crouched down. "Isn't that Isaac?" she asked. We all jumped up to peek out the window at the small-framed young man limping towards the end of the block. "That is Isaac." Max exclaimed excitedly, but the excitement quickly faded as we all realized that he was limping because he was infected. A tense silence hung in the stale, humid air as we watched until Isaac was out of sight. Randy cleared his throat. "The alley in the back appears to be clear enough anyway," he told us. He waved his arm. "Come on, let's get out of the city before nightfall." We followed solemnly. By dusk, we had made our way out of the city. Nobody really spoke in the last few hours, but nobody really knew what to say. We entered a wooded area and decided to set up camp. After building a fire, we watched silently as Randy began tying a rope in between trees surrounding our camp. He brushed his hands on his pants and noticed us watching. "It's like a tripwire. I will tie some empty cans to the rope, and if anything trips over it, we will hear it before it gets too close," he explained. "I'll help." Max jumped up. After they had finished, we sat quietly around the fire. "I'm sorry as hell about Isaac. I really am. I tried to talk to him last night, but he had made up his mind." "I couldn't talk him out of it," Randy finally said as he stared at his hands. Nobody spoke. "I hear people," Max whispered, and we all listened. A small group of people were close by. We could hear at least 3 people talking. Should we try and find them? Safety in numbers? Max was sounding excited at the prospect of more people in our group. "Wait. We don't want to walk into a trap," Randy hushed him. "A trap? Seriously?" Max whispered, incredulous. "Yeah, living people are doing what we're doing, surviving. You run into the wrong ones and you end up with your stuff stolen and half your camp dead." "Man, what is with you?" Max snapped. "Face it, it's the end of the world. People are no longer going to be civilized, survival instinct kicks in and we become primitive. We can't trust anyone." Randy was watching the trees now, as the voices got closer. "Well, I guarantee they can hear us," I chimed in. Randy shrugged his shoulders and continued to watch for them. Just then 3 men appeared at the edge of our camp. "Hey there, Frank. We got some new people. Come out here," a tall, muscular man with black hair and a thick mustache called out with a slight grin, not taking his eyes off of us. "Name's Adam." He stuck his hand out to Randy, who was now standing in front of him. Abby and I exchanged looks. I was getting uncomfortable. As Randy shook hands with the stranger, his other 2 friends came into our view. "This here's Frank." Adam pointed to a short, fat, balding man in wire-rimmed glasses who appeared around mid-50s. Frank wiped a sweaty palm on his pants and awkwardly extended his arm for a handshake. Randy hesitated, then shook his hand quickly. "And this one's George." He paused. Frank's oldest son. Adam nodded toward a younger man in his 20s. He was also short but appeared in better shape than his father. George had long brown hair that he had pulled neatly back in a ponytail, and his smile lit up his whole face as he shook hands with Randy. We introduced ourselves, and they sat at our campfire to share their story of how they got out of the city. Adam did all the talking. We were stuck in an office building. Frank and I worked together. We did anyway. Insurance sales, crappy job, we'll miss that. Anyway, George here came over right away when the news started getting real weird and the 3 of us waited out the first wave. He paused a moment, watching us all closely, then continued. "We were lucky we was on the 10th floor of that building. Those things can't climb stairs too well, and they seem to slow down during the day. So, when the sun came up, we managed to find our way out. Hit up a gun shop on the way out of town. Shooting him in head does him in, you know," he explained. "Yeah, I know," Randy muttered, still watching Adam closely. "So where did you guys hole up last night?" Adam asked. "We found an armory in town," Max volunteered, and Randy shot him a cold look, causing Max to drop his head. "An armory? That's great. I bet you guys found a ton of supplies," Adam exclaimed excitedly. "Mostly looted and picked over already by the time we got there," Randy answered, annoyed. "That's too bad," Adam responded, sounding disappointed. An uncomfortable silence filled the air. Finally, Randy spoke. "So, y'all set up camp around here?" "Yeah, other side of the woods. We was out looking for something to hunt. Not much for wildlife roaming around, though. Adam was staring hard at Abby, causing her to scoot closer to Max. Well, it's dark. We should head back. Nice to meet you folks. Adam stood up to leave. Maybe see you around. Adam waved as he turned back to where he had first appeared. He gives me the creeps, Abby said when they disappeared from sight. I don't trust him far as I can throw him. Randy was still staring in the direction they had disappeared. Try and get some sleep. I'll keep watch tonight, Randy said, finally breaking his stare. No. You need sleep. You need your energy. I've had gun training. I'm not a good shot, but I would only have to warn them if they come back, Max protested. Randy looked at him thoughtfully and nodded. Okay, kid, but if anything goes down, you wake me up to help you. Don't try no hero shit, he said, giving him a friendly slap on the back, and Max nodded in agreement. That night, Abby pulled her sleeping bag close to mine. Sorry, Grace. I need someone close or I won't sleep. I don't mean to be weird or creepy. Not weird at all. We all feel vulnerable out here, I reassured her, relieved to have someone close. Within minutes, Randy was snoring, sitting on a rock with a gun in his lap. How can he sleep like that? Abby whispered. I began to giggle, which prompted Abby to join. I don't know, but he looks ridiculous and uncomfortable. I said. I caught my breath. We slept through the night without incident, and when morning came, Max announced that he had managed to kill 3 of the infected during the night that had wandered into camp. I used my knife. I didn't want to wake anyone up if I didn't have to. I'm thinking we should use our ammo sparingly, he announced proudly. Good kid. Randy yawned and stretched. We should probably move on. I'm worried those guys will come back, and this time, it won't be a social call. Randy looked annoyed. Where are we headed? I asked as we packed up our gear. We need to find shelter that we can make safe and a vehicle, Randy answered. Let's head west. For now, keep an eye out for large groups of the infected, and those guys from last night, he added. We walked on for the majority of the day, stopping occasionally for short breaks. By the time our shadows began to lengthen and the sky turned a red-orange, I began to notice something odd. We had not seen a single living person since the night before. This was making me uneasy. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad we haven't seen those guys from the camp, but I can't help but notice we haven't seen anybody all day. We can't be the only survivors out there. I announced my concerns to no one in particular. My 3 comrades were silent a moment, then Randy said, There are more survivors, of course. We should probably be glad we haven't seen any of them anyway, he said bitterly. What is with you, man? Max snapped at Randy. What you mean by that? Randy snapped back. You have been doing nothing but talk about how you don't trust living people and refuse to let anyone else join us. What's your problem? Max stopped to face him. People out there surviving will do anything to keep surviving. Anything. Randy wouldn't look at any of us. That includes us, you know. We are just surviving. Besides, none of us knew each other before this started. Max sounded a bit calmer now. That was different. Randy boomed, causing Max to jump back from him. Randy stormed off ahead without another word, while the 3 of us exchanged concerned and confused looks. We began to follow hesitantly. Our trust in him was wavering. He was clearly hiding something. We walked on in silence until the sun faded, moonlight guiding us through the thick brush, when the smell of burning wood drifted to us from up ahead. Our moods began to brighten as we drew nearer to the rising smoke of the fire, and the sound of people talking got louder and louder. We came to a line of trees. Beyond them we could see the glow of the fire and 2, maybe 3 people sitting near it. As we got to the edge of the trees, Randy shot out his arm to stop us, holding a finger to his lips. We stopped and peered through the trees. Hiya, gang, a male voice called out. Come join us, we don't bite. We could barely see the man speaking, but something didn't feel right. Come on, don't be rude, guys, it's Adam, remember me? He asked, seemingly amused. My blood ran cold.